Get your medieval geek on with Shadiversity hoodies, available through Teespring, link in the description.
Shadiversity.
Greetings, I'm Shad and welcome to my realism and practicality review of Skingrad, one of the cities from the video game The Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Now, in this review, I'll be looking at how effectively designed the city's defenses are, and also how realistic and practical they are compared to proper historical medieval architecture, embattlements, designs, fortifications. I have to say, I just love Skingrad, and also all the buildings and cities in Oblivion. The attention to detail is exceptional in this game. They have this wonderful high medieval style to the architecture, and it just looks beautiful. Now, that isn't to say it's perfect. See, what we see here in the buildings is that the upper floors overhang the lower floors. Now, this is a very historical design style for medieval style buildings. But what they've done here is they've actually done it a bit too much for stone style buildings. You see how much the upper floors are being extended out from the lower ones? This upper wall here should really be resting on the corbel that is supporting it underneath. If it was built out of timber, the timbers could be jutting out to support this extended wall, and in timber buildings you can get, and just to let you know, this style, it's called jettying. So jettying is the name for when a building's upper floor is extended out above its lower floor. And for timber buildings, you can jetty the upper floors to the extent that we're seeing here, but because these are stone, it's just extended too much. Like this wall, as I said, it's stone. It's very architecturally unsound, and it would collapse. Like, mostly what we're seeing here is architecturally impossible. What needs to be done is what we see here. See how the corbels supporting the walls underneath are in line with the wall above it? That's how it should be done. And that's how they were done historically, and also how they're done on castle-style battlements. But still, you know, with minor inaccuracies like this, they're mostly forgivable in regards to just how beautiful they are, with all the attention to detail. See the timber framing here? Oh, it just looks brilliant. And the Gothic chapel here. But let's have a look at the city overall. And thanks to the wonderful Open Cities mod, we can zoom out and have a look at this city's layout in great detail. Of course, the first thing to mention, as I always mention with these city/castle reviews, is the size, and Skingrad is not the size of a city. It's, of course, far too small. But if this city was, say, ramped up in size, but the basic layout as we see here was kept the same, oh my goodness, this is a beautiful layout. One of the best I have ever seen, in fact. And when I say one of the best I've ever seen, I'm referring to video game cities. Do you see what they have done here? Have a look where the primary entrances are. Well, first of all, there are, of course, three. Two of them kind of run down the guts of the city, dividing it in two. Now, I'm going to talk about this more, because there is a lot to talk about this design feature. But first, I want to just address the third entrance off to the side, because having this third entrance here might seem like it is undermining the defensive advantages that I'll be talking about on the two main entrances. And that is not actually the case, because this third side entrance, it opens to a bridge which leads to another kind of a mountain, which would be hard to get access to, especially for like siege engines and stuff. And it also has a secondary gatehouse to this third entrance. Do you see how giddy I am about this? Like, if you've seen any of my castle reviews before, you'll hear me mention that having secondary gatehouses are awesome. Well, Skingrad has that, doubling up the defenses of this third entrance. So I consider it quite well fortified, and it doesn't undermine the two main entrances of the city. Now let's have a look at it. Now, as I mentioned, these two main entrances cut the city in two. From a defensive standpoint, this is brilliant. It means if the enemy ever breaches one of these outer gatehouses, for the third entrance they have another gatehouse to deal with, and for the two primary entrances, they get caught in the middle of two defensive walls on either side. If you've watched my review of the Imperial City, specifically part 2, I mentioned how they could have improved the connecting roadways to the prison and also the Wizard's College thing, that they should actually have two walls on either side of the walkway, and this is essentially exactly what has been done here. You see, with castles and castle-like defenses, it's much easier to break through the gates than trying to make your own entrance by breaking through one of the outer walls. The gate is wood, much thinner than the thick stone, so they need to be the most heavily fortified parts of any type of medieval style defenses. Now, so the enemy, of course, that's where they're going to target generally most of their attacks, unless it's so fortified that it would be suicide, which is the whole point. You want to strengthen the weak parts. But say if an enemy does manage to break through the gate, they get here, and they don't have direct access to the city because there's, a bit of a mound barrier here. And unfortunately, what there isn't, there does not seem to be portcullises blocking off these two kind of entranceways from the bridge, and also the actual entrances from this section to the main cities. Now, there does look to be, of course, access for a portcullis. I just don't see one, because say if the portcullis was raised from this, entrance, this archway gate, well, there's not enough room for it to fit into the wall above. So there's actually no portcullis here at all. This is a big defensive blunder, but I mainly put that down to a modeling game error. Because if anyone actually did make this city, they would have brains to put it there. But still, I gotta take points off for that. I've taken points off for every other city that does not have portcullises or room for portcullises in their archways. But say if they were there, okay, and an enemy broke through, they wouldn't be able to get direct access to the archways and entrances from the bridge, or the main access ways from this kind of, I would call it the kill zone. Because look at what they have on either side here. Two big defensive walls, and one of the things that I particularly love about it is that the battlements of these walls are facing the direction where the enemy will be. So often when, video game castles and designs like that, and I will put a caveat here because you also see this historically done, when an enemy is able to break to get in behind the walls of a city or castle, there are no battlements on the back side. Sometimes there are, but also historically sometimes there were not. And in my opinion, it is far more advantageous to have double-sided battlements on walls, so if an enemy ever breaks in and gets behind them, the defenders on the wall have cover and are able to fire down on the attackers who are inside. And this is what we see here. This is one of those ultimate kill zone areas which are just brilliant. Big points to Skingrad for having this. So the overall layout that we see here is brilliant, and it's also brilliant even for the size. So say Skingrad was just a fortified commune, say if it was like a monk abbey or something like that. Brilliant, okay? Very defensible. This is truly a fortress, and if you were to ramp it up in size as well, but keep the same layout, still brilliant. Wonderful. So now that we've had a look at the layout, let's have a look at some of the more kind of smaller defensive elements, like the thickness of the walls, or just the walls. So let's have a look at the walls themselves. And first thing, yes, the thickness is brilliant. Look at it, this is at least 2 meters thick. This is exactly as thick as you would want a city or castle wall to be. Oh, big points. And then the merlons are the right size. Head height. And not only that, on top of that, we have arrow loops in between the merlons. This is a very historical design. Not all merlons had arrow loops in between, but many did. Very historical, very accurate, and very effective. So the advantage of having an arrow loop on a merlon is that if you have a defender standing here, and so that would be about head height, so about here, they can either lean out and fire down at attackers, you know, assailing the walls, or if there's too much arrow fire, you know, shooting at them, they can, of course, shoot through the arrow loop here. See here? Brilliant! See these straight kind of stone pillars that are running down the walls. These are called buttresses. Now, buttresses came in design more so with Gothic cathedrals, because to build stone high and for it to be stable, they need to be thick. That was the medieval kind of mentality. But if you wanted the wall to be much thinner and have the same height, you would put what's called a buttress on it, which is a part of stone which extends out of the wall to add extra stability, and that enabled stone walls to be able to be thinner but built just as high. So in regards to having buttresses on an actual thick castle-like wall, there's no architectural reason for them to be put on there apart from aesthetics, and they look great, okay? And so it's interesting, there are a lot of castle design elements that were added purely for aesthetical reasons. So I'm not going to detract points, you know, from Skingrad for having buttresses along the wall, because they also serve as intermediary, mixing up my words here, merlons as well. You know, the defenders on these walls could use these buttresses as cover, as you know, they are effectively merlons. So I will actually, you know, kind of a few more points in my mind for this city slash castle's defenses. Now, of course, we will get to the castle itself, which is right here. Gee, there's a lot of good things about that castle. See here on the Gothic cathedral itself, this is exactly where you need buttresses, and of course it has buttresses as well, and this, like, this is a textbook perfect cathedral. Scaled down, which is perfectly fine. There were smaller cathedrals and there are larger ones, but in terms of how accurately designed this cathedral is, mostly accurate, okay? There are a couple of odd things. See, like the buttresses here are extending on the inside of the wall, which could be done to give that extra stability. Doesn't really need to be. The main purpose of the buttresses is they extend out from the wall on the outside, not on the inside. So the outside here, to add that stability because the wall is much thinner. And what we have here, see these things here, these are called flying buttresses. And so the purpose of these buttresses, these suspended ones in the air, are to add stability to the inner wall, because there's generally not as much room for actual normal buttresses, but to put normal buttresses here extending on the inside, which is a bit odd. But still, I mean, overall, this cathedral is just brilliant. Just add another thing that is brilliant, you know, attention to detail. Chimneys. Do you see how all these buildings, most of them, thank goodness, have chimneys? Every medieval building, whatever, if it was meant for any level of actual human habitation, would have a fireplace and chimneys. That was the main and only source of proper heat in this period. And of course, there's not enough farms in the surrounding land around about. So the gatehouses, all of them, seem to follow the exact same design mostly. So the gatehouses, the two main gatehouses on the city, have odd kind of flanking towers. I'm hard pressed to call them actual flanking towers because they are not extended far enough out in front of the gate. And so when we see here, no flanking towers here, which, you know, that's not a unhistorical thing. It just means it's a bit less defended than what it could have been. But there's the question of, are they necessarily needed? And see, this one here, it does have 2 proper flanking towers, but again, they are not extended far enough in front of the gate to enable anyone who's actually kind of in these towers to properly fire down people trying to batter down the gate itself. They would be able to fire to some extent to people on the bridge, but to get the best angle of fire, these 2 towers here would be extended forward, and this is where we see a very common design style for medieval castle and or city gatehouses, where the flanking towers are architecturally combined with the gatehouse itself. But this does not mean what is actually here already isn't good. So, like this gatehouse here, no, there are no flanking towers, but it is still brilliant for one glorious thing, and it's the same on all the gatehouses. Can you see what is so good about it? Let me come down. I'll come down and show you what is so brilliant about these gatehouses' design. We will go in. And what do we see? Machicolations! Yes! There are properly designed machicolations here! Do you see here? Provision! It is not blocked off! And look, yes, if we go right in, we can say, look, they haven't modelled, but that's because they haven't modelled the inside of the, upper gatehouse itself. It is clearly been made to show that these are proper architectural machicolations. Have a look, people. I actually think this might be a first, alright? This might be the first time in any video game castle city review where I have seen actual machicolations. And it's not just, on this gatehouse. Look. It's on both sides of the gatehouse. See here? So the corbel extending an opening for, people to be able to fire down in between. So it's not just there, but it's on all of the gatehouses. Look, machicolations. This gives Skingrad and Oblivion some of the biggest points I've ever given to any city or castle. It is rarely ever done, but this is one of the most, serious and effective design features you can have on castles, and they look brilliant because so often people think this design where you have these small archways in between the corbels, people think that it's just an aesthetic visual thing, and it has been added for pure visual embellishment on castles, even historical castles. And it was done just purely aesthetic, extensions that did not have the military application at all. But to see it done properly, okay, on real castles and video game castles is brilliant. This really makes Skingrad one of the most accurate and effective city/castles I have seen to date in any video game. Look at these windows, beautiful, and supported by, proper stonework underneath, and they just looks great. So yeah, just something odd about this gatehouse here is, again, there's no portcullis. Now, there does seem to be enough room that it could have been raised up into the gatehouse above, but the odd thing is, if we go have a look at, the companion gatehouse, there's a portcullis here, but yet there's no portcullis on this one down here. So is this an oversight? Is it not meant to be there? So, it's a bit weird. It's a little dumb. And the other thing about this gatehouse, this is great. Don't get me wrong, I think it's one of the better gatehouses I've actually seen in any video game so far, as I've mentioned. But doesn't mean it couldn't be improved, like the thing that I mentioned about the flanking towers being in the right position as opposed to the gate itself. And then it could have had 2 portcullises, not just one sitting smack bang right in the middle, because if you had a front one and a back one, you could then fit in murder holes in between, which would just increase its defensive capabilities more so. Yeah, see this hill that connects the third entrance from the city to the castle? It's pretty high. It's got some steep edges to it. So yeah, as I mentioned before, you're not going to get siege engines up on top of this thing to then... And that's the thing, because this is the main entrance to the castle. So if someone was trying to assault the castle through its main entrance, you have to first get on top of this hill, and the easiest access to this hill is from the third entrance. But to get access to that third entrance and the bridge to the hill, you would need to get into the city. And so that is a lot of layers of defense. Now, I'm not saying that just men, could run up this hill. They could, but trying to defend themselves properly and without, siege equipment helping them, it would be very much suicide. So the terrain here is really helping out the defensive capabilities of the city and castle as we see it. And in respect to the castle as opposed to the city, oh, I love it. It is just awesome. First of all, its position is glorious. Like I've mentioned in other castle videos, one of the more important principles of castle design is location. You know the saying, location, location, location? Well, with castles, that's the first primary thing you would want to look at, because if you put the castle on the right location, it can almost become impenetrable just by sheer inaccessibility from its position. And Skingrad really has this. Speaking of the castle, Skingrad, not the city. Now, just have a look at it. There's no way a siege tower, or even, look, you could probably set up trebuchets, at a distance from, close enough, what I mean to say, to be able to bombard the castle. But it would be difficult, you can't get right up close to it. I must mention its outwards defense, meaning this beautiful big bridge leading from its primary gatehouse and having a secondary gatehouse on the other end. This is so good. This is what you want, okay? This huge big bridge here will bottleneck the enemy, and really it's the only primary way of approaching the castle. Any other way is extremely difficult. Look at how steep the hill that it's on. Okay, so effectively, you really do have just one approach, which is the bridge right here. So the enemy is going to be completely bottlenecked, and then there are two gatehouses to it. One external gatehouse, and then the primary gatehouse to the main castle body. And these gatehouses have machicolations on them. And yes, the flanking towers could be done better, and there could also be a drawbridge, okay? So there are one or two missed opportunities here, but look at the way they have to approach. Now, the interesting thing about having this big bridge here is that there were many historical castles that had bridges to their main front entrance that also did not have drawbridges when there could have been drawbridges added to them. The best example that I can think of this is Corfe Castle, one of my all-time favorite historical castles. A big, beautiful bridge leading to its most external gatehouse, and it's a kind of external bailey. And it's interesting, no, there isn't a gatehouse on the far end of the bridge of Corfe Castle, but it doesn't necessarily need it because there are 2 or 3 other gatehouses you got to get through to get to the main castle body itself. So it has that layers of defense element. But just like Skingrad Castle, again, no drawbridge on the bridge that leads to the gatehouse. So, not unhistorical, just in my mind, it could have been more defended than what it is. But that's the thing, you can never really have too many defenses on any castle-like building, and sometimes people are satisfied with enough. Enough defenses to do the job to protect the occupants, if it's a city or a castle. Just if it's enough to protect the people, enough is enough. And so I think that is the mentality with the bridge of Corfe Castle, and therefore also applies here with the bridge of Skingrad Castle. Now, in regards to castle design, there are some great elements to it, and just one or two odd things. There are no windows of any, significant size close to the ground. It doesn't have battlements on the back end, so that is a negative to it. But then you have to ask how many people will be trying to assault the castle from this side, because there aren't many windows facing it for them to get through anyway. I mean, you would only assault the parts of the castle that you can get purchase on. So that means running up with ladders to try and assault the walls to get access to the ramparts, attacking or trying to batter down the front gates, and then, of course, getting access to windows. And so if there are not any of those things, ramparts, windows, or gates, what on earth are you trying to assault? What, to get onto the roof? Good luck. What good is that going to do? And so because of that, there is not much need for Skingrad to have, battlements on its backside. The only exception to this, if they try and bombard that part of the castle with some serious kind of siege equipment, like a trebuchet, but that's just going to demolish that part of the castle, and then you could try and get people to, get in, but demolishing a castle isn't always a great thing. One, you can't use it then, afterwards, and two, the rubble doesn't go anywhere, so if you knock down a part of the wall, oftentimes the rubble is going to be in your way to try and get into the castle as well. Someone obviously lost the plot when modelling this part of the roof of the castle. What is going on here? This is a mess. Now, of course, who really ever would actually get up to see this part of the castle, and also using free cam, so in the context of playing the game normally, you would never see it, so I guess they just left it like that, but still, yeah, it's a mess. Something that I really love about Skingrad Castle is that its layout, so when we look at it from above, its outer walls and layout are basically comprised of different buildings. And so this is interesting because, and it's also a historical thing. So if we have a look in closer, just to emphasize what I mean, it just doesn't have a wall which creates an internal bailey. The wall itself is made out of different buildings, different structures that can have rooms or any number of things within them. So if we go down close and have a look here from the bailey, we see these are essentially different parts of the building. Now, of course, when you go in, you can't get access to any of the rooms that would be in these, parts of the building and structure, but they essentially create the outer wall. This is exactly how another historical castle was basically constructed to get the castle kind of style, which is having an internal bailey and such, and that is Chateau de Chillon, or Castle Chillon. This is one of the most beautiful and iconic kind of real medieval style castles that you will see, and it honestly comes up a lot in terms of when people are showing awesome pictures of castles or even making 3D models of castles. Many people take Chateau de Chillon as a foundation or inspiration for their designs. And what you'll see here on Chillon is that its entire structure is made out of essentially different buildings that are all interconnected, making kind of a ring, forming the common castle-like layout, as I mentioned, which is to have an internal bailey. In fact, there seems to be a lot of similarities between Chillon and Skingrad Castle. So the fact that Skingrad Castle is done in the same way just thrills me. It adds to the realism of this castle, and it makes it so much more immersive. There is, the way I kind of describe it, and this is how you can kind of look at a lot of medieval castles and even just cottage designs, there is this chaotic kind of realism, and it's almost like it's mishmashed together in terms of what parts of the building are then put on next. Like, we'll just add we'll add a square kind of a building here, and then a more rectangular one next to it, and like I said, it creates this chaotic kind of not real symmetry, but everything then sits in balance, and it just looks really aesthetically pleasing as a result, like a chaotic balance to it all. I love it, and Skingrad Castle has it. One of the best video game castles I have seen. And of course, big points for having those Machicolations right there out in front on this gatehouse. So, when we have a look at the castle, of Skingrad itself, combined with all those brilliant elements that we looked at of the city. Yes, Skingrad so far, the best medieval, city castle in a video game that I've reviewed so far. In my mind, this is even better than Novigrad, particularly because of all the bigger, points that the castle itself received and how well done it was. So there you go, this has been my historical evaluation, indeed, my analysis of the medieval castle-like defences, how realistic and effective or practical they are, of course, Skingrad, from the Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Thank you very much for watching, it has been a pleasure, I hope to see you again, and until that time, farewell.